It has been raining steadily here in Franklin since yesterday afternoon. It is one of those slow, persistent spring rains that turns the sky a flat gray and makes the house feel like a closed ecosystem. Eleanor is reading in the living room, and I have been sitting here in my study for the better part of the morning, looking through a cardboard box of old photographs and work files I brought down from the attic last weekend. I was looking for a specific document, but instead I found a photograph taken at a publishing conference in Chicago back in 1994. There are 6 of us in the picture, standing around a large mahogany table, all wearing the oversized suits that were fashionable at the time. I am on the left, looking tired and a little overweight, but my eyes were drawn immediately to the man standing in the center. His name was Arthur. He was the senior editor at the firm, a few years older than me, and without question, he was the person everyone in the office considered the pinnacle of health. I sat in my leather chair for a long time just looking at Arthur's face. He was the kind of man who woke up at 4 in the morning to run 5 miles before coming into the office. He was militant about his diet. This was the mid-90s, the absolute peak of the low-fat movement, and Arthur followed the guidelines like a religion. I remember exactly what he ate because he talked about it constantly. Every morning he had a massive bowl of heart-healthy granola with skim milk and a large tall glass of pure orange juice. For lunch he ate turkey on whole wheat bread, fat-free fruit yogurt, and a handful of organic pretzels. He avoided butter, he avoided red meat, and he drank heavily marketed sports drinks after his runs. We all looked up to him. We all thought he was doing everything exactly right. Arthur was diagnosed with aggressive colon cancer when he was 68. He passed away less than a year later. For decades, I looked at what happened to Arthur as a tragic lottery ticket. I thought it was just terrible luck, a roll of the genetic dice that could not be predicted or prevented. I thought that sometimes, even when you do everything perfectly, the body simply betrays you. But as I have grown older, and especially after the period when Eleanor went through her own severe health crisis, my perspective on luck and genetics has fundamentally shifted. The fear I felt in those hospital waiting rooms forced me to stop accepting the easy answers. It forced me to start reading, to start digging into the actual mechanics of human biology, trying to understand why our bodies break down, and why rogue cells suddenly decide to take over. And what I found, the information I uncovered in the quiet hours of my mornings with a wooden pencil in my notebooks, completely shattered the illusions I had held for my entire adult life. I realized that Arthur did not just have bad luck. I realized that Arthur, with the best of intentions, following the absolute best advice of his era, was actively and aggressively feeding the very disease that eventually took his life. The hardest thing for someone my age to accept is that the rules we were taught to live by were not just slightly flawed, they were structurally backwards. We were taught to look at labels. We were taught that words like natural, organic, fat-free, and heart-healthy were guarantees of safety. We trusted the packaging. But the human body does not read marketing copy. The cells inside your organs do not care if the syrup in your oatmeal was harvested from an organic agave plant or manufactured in a chemical refinery. Your biology only reads molecular structures. And the most disturbing realization I had during my months of reading was that many of the specific foods we consume to supposedly protect our health are the exact same fuels that rogue, mutated cells use to multiply, build their own infrastructure, and eventually take over the host. To understand this, I had to completely relearn how I thought about cancer. Like most people, I used to think of it as an invader, like a virus or a bacteria that sneaks into the body from the outside. But that is not what it is. Cancer is us. It is our own cells, our own biology, that has forgotten how to behave. In a healthy body, there is a beautiful, elegant system of checks and balances. I learned a word during my research that I had never heard before in my 60-plus years on Earth: apoptosis. It basically means programmed cell death. When a normal cell gets old, or when its DNA gets damaged from environmental stress or just the natural wear and tear of living, it recognizes that it is broken. It knows it is no longer useful. So, for the good of the whole body, it quietly dismantles itself. It essentially commits a graceful suicide so that a new, healthy cell can take its place. But a cancer cell is a cell that has lost its memory of apoptosis. It is damaged, it is broken, but it refuses to die. It becomes immortal in the worst possible way. And because it refuses to die, it needs to survive. It needs to grow. It needs to multiply. And just like any living thing that is trying to grow rapidly, it requires massive, unbelievable amounts of fuel. This is where my understanding of the foods we eat fundamentally changed. I was reading a fascinating paper about a German scientist from the 1920s named Otto Warburg. It took me a long time to translate the heavy academic language into something I could visualize, but what I eventually understood made me drop my pencil on the desk. Normal, healthy cells use oxygen to create energy. It is a clean, efficient process, like a well-tuned engine running on high-grade fuel. But Warburg discovered that cancer cells have broken engines. They cannot use oxygen efficiently. Instead, they rely on a much older, much more primitive form of energy production called fermentation. They ferment sugar. And because fermentation is a terribly inefficient way to generate energy, a rogue cell requires roughly 10 to 15 times more glucose than a healthy cell just to stay alive. They are absolute gluttons for sugar. They sit in the body like highly sensitive radar dishes, waiting for any spike in blood glucose, and when it arrives, they consume it aggressively to fuel their rapid, chaotic division. When I fully grasped what the researchers were calling the Warburg effect, I immediately thought of Arthur. I thought of my own habits. For years, I considered myself a healthy eater because I started my day with a massive fruit smoothie. I would put a banana, a cup of berries, a generous pour of organic apple juice, and a spoonful of raw honey into a blender. I thought I was drinking a glass of pure vitality. I did not realize that by pulverizing the fruit and stripping away the intact fiber matrix, I was creating a liquid sugar bomb. I was flooding my bloodstream with a massive spike of glucose and fructose within minutes of waking up. If there was a single microscopic rogue cell anywhere in my body struggling to survive, I was delivering exactly what it needed to thrive directly to its front door. We have been conditioned to believe that sugar is only dangerous if it comes in a candy wrapper or a soda can. But the tumor does not know the difference. The rogue cell does not care that the sugar causing your blood glucose to spike came from a bowl of organic stone-ground oatmeal sweetened with natural maple syrup. It only knows that the fuel has arrived. When you eat a bowl of healthy granola, which is essentially just toasted carbohydrates glued together with hidden sugars, your digestive system breaks it down into glucose. When you drink a glass of orange juice, you are removing the protective fiber of the orange and mainlining the fructose straight into your liver. You are creating the exact metabolic environment that a broken fermenting cell requires to survive its vulnerability. But the sugar itself is only half of the tragic equation. As I dug deeper into the notebooks scattered across my desk, I began to understand a second mechanism that is arguably even more dangerous. It involves a hormone that I had always associated strictly with diabetes. I always thought insulin was just something your body used to manage blood sugar, a sort of biological traffic cop. But my daughter Rebecca, who is a nutritionist, helped me understand that insulin is much more than that. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. In simple terms, it is a growth signal. When insulin levels are high, the message being broadcast to every single cell in your body is to build, store, and multiply. I started to visualize insulin as a powerful fertilizer. If you have a beautiful, healthy lawn and you spread fertilizer over it, the grass will grow. But if there is a weed hiding in that grass, a weed that is naturally aggressive and invasive, that fertilizer is going to make the weed grow 10 times faster and stronger than the grass around it. A rogue, mutating cell is that weed. And every time you eat a meal that spikes your blood sugar, your pancreas releases a flood of insulin to bring it down. You are spreading the fertilizer. This realization completely broke my understanding of the conventional dietary advice we have been fed for decades. The experts used to tell us, and some still do, that the healthiest way to eat is to consume 5 or 6 small meals throughout the day. They told us to graze. They said it keeps the metabolism moving. I used to do this. I would have my smoothie, then a healthy mid-morning snack of dried fruit, then a light sandwich, then some whole wheat crackers in the afternoon. I thought I was doing my body a favor. What I was actually doing was keeping my insulin levels elevated from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to sleep. I was keeping the growth signal turned on permanently. I was never giving my body the quiet, unfertilized time it needed to recognize the weeds and pull them out. I want to pause my train of thought here for a moment. A lot of the people who watch these videos, who sit with me through these long explanations, have not actually subscribed to the channel. Daniel, my son, always reminds me to mention this because it is the only way this platform knows that these conversations matter. If you are finding yourself reflecting on your own habits while listening to this, please take a second to click that subscribe button. It helps us keep this space going without having to rely on the loud, sensational tactics you see everywhere else. I am grateful for your time. Understanding the Warburg effect and the role of insulin was terrifying, but it was the next piece of the puzzle that actually gave me a sense of agency. I spent an entire rainy Tuesday trying to understand another biological process with a complicated name: angiogenesis. I traced the diagrams in the medical journals until the graphite on my pencil was dull. Angiogenesis is the process by which the body creates new blood vessels. When you are a child growing into an adult, or when you suffer a deep wound that needs to heal, your body uses angiogenesis to build supply lines to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the new tissue. It is a vital, life-saving function. But a tumor, once it grows beyond the size of a pinhead, cannot survive on just the ambient glucose floating nearby. It needs its own dedicated supply line. It needs a highway. So the rogue cells hijack the angiogenesis process. They send out chemical distress signals that trick the body into building brand new blood vessels directly into the heart of the tumor. They literally wire themselves into your circulatory system so they can siphon off the nutrients they need to grow from a tiny speck into a life-threatening mass. When I read this, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. But then I read the next page. I learned that this process is not inevitable. The body has natural inhibitors that keep angiogenesis in check, preventing unapproved blood vessels from forming. And the strength of these inhibitors is directly tied to what we consume, and more importantly, when we do not consume anything at all. I learned that certain foods actively promote angiogenesis, while others actively starve it. The foods that promote it are the exact same highly processed, high-sugar, high-glycemic carbohydrates that I had been eating under the guise of health. But the real revelation came when I looked at the research on fasting. I had always thought of fasting as a tool for weight loss, something people did to shed a few pounds before a holiday. I had no idea it was a profound therapeutic mechanism. When you stop eating for an extended period, when you close the kitchen after dinner and do not consume anything but water or black coffee until late the next morning, your body goes through a radical shift. Because there is no incoming glucose, insulin levels drop to their absolute baseline. The fertilizer is removed. As the fasting window extends, the body realizes it needs energy, so it starts looking internally. It activates a process called autophagy, which I've talked about before. The body starts acting like a ruthless building inspector. It patrols the tissues, looking for damaged, inefficient, or rogue cells. Because the insulin signal is quiet and the glucose fuel is scarce, the rogue cells are incredibly vulnerable. They cannot ferment efficiently because there is no sugar to ferment, and without the insulin growth signal, they struggle to send the chemical messages required to build their blood vessels. By simply restricting the hours in which I ate, I realized I could actively starve the bad cells before they ever had a chance to build their highways. I could create a metabolic environment that was incredibly hostile to cancer, while simultaneously being incredibly restorative to my healthy tissue. The day I finally put all these pieces together was the day our pantry changed forever. I remember Eleanor standing in the kitchen, watching me pull items off the shelves and put them into a black garbage bag. I threw away the organic agave nectar. I threw away the boxes of heart-healthy cereal that were loaded with hidden maltodextrin. I threw away the cartons of fruit juice, the low-fat flavored yogurts, the whole wheat crackers, and the dried cranberries that were coated in cane sugar. Eleanor asked me what I was doing. I told her I was tired of feeding the things that were trying to kill us. We had a long conversation that afternoon at the kitchen table. I explained to her what I had learned about Arthur, about insulin, about the way tumors ferment sugar. Eleanor is a practical woman. She does not panic easily, but she listened to the science. We made a decision together that we were going to stop eating for convenience and stop trusting the marketing on the boxes. The transition was not easy. When you have spent 60 years eating a certain way, your palate is hijacked. You crave the sweet, easy energy of processed carbohydrates. The first few weeks, I missed my morning smoothie terribly. I missed the comforting crunch of granola. But I replaced them with foods that maintained the structural integrity of their fiber. If I wanted an apple, I ate the whole apple, chewing the skin and the fiber so the sugar would release slowly into my bloodstream, preventing the insulin spike. We started eating massive amounts of bitter greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, which I learned contain powerful natural compounds that actively inhibit angiogenesis. We started eating healthy fats, olive oil, avocados, and walnuts, because rogue cells have a very difficult time using fat for fuel. Fat does not trigger the massive insulin response that carbohydrates do. But the most important change, the rule I adhere to with absolute discipline, is the fasting window. I do not graze anymore. I eat 2, sometimes 3 distinct meals a day, and I do not eat between them. When dinner is finished at 6 in the evening, the engine shuts down. I do not consume a single calorie until 10 o'clock the next morning. I give my body 16 hours of uninterrupted, unfertilized time to clean house. I give my system the time it needs to hunt down the damaged cells and force them into apoptosis. I make sure that if there is a weed trying to grow in the dark, it has absolutely no fuel and no fertilizer to help it survive the night. It has been several years since we made these changes. I am 77 now. I cannot sit here and tell you that I have cured anything, or that I have a magical shield against disease. I am not a doctor, and I know that cancer is a complex, terrifyingly adaptable enemy. Genetics still play a role. Environmental toxins still play a role. There are no absolute guarantees in aging. But what I can tell you is that the quiet, chronic inflammation that used to live in my joints has disappeared. The brain fog that I thought was just a normal part of getting older has lifted. I feel a structural stability in my body that I have not felt since my early 50s. When I go in for my blood work, my fasting insulin is exceptionally low, and my inflammatory markers are almost non-existent. I know that inside my body the environment is calm, the roads are clear, the building inspector is doing his job every single night. I think about Arthur often. I think about how hard he tried and how profoundly he was misled by the industry that was supposed to protect him. He drank his juice and ate his fat-free yogurt believing he was building a fortress, when in reality, he was laying out a banquet for his own destruction. It brings a deep sorrow to my heart, a specific kind of grief for a generation of men and women who did exactly what they were told and paid the ultimate price for it. I am telling you all of this because the narrative has not changed enough. You can walk into any grocery store today and see the same marketing tactics, the same hidden sugars, the same processed carbohydrates masquerading as vital health foods. You will still hear people recommending that you eat small meals all day long to keep your energy up. You will still see older folks pouring glasses of apple juice thinking they are doing their bodies a favor. The danger has not gone away. It has just changed its packaging. You have to become your own defender. You have to stop looking at the front of the box and start thinking about the actual chemistry of what you are putting into your mouth. You have to ask yourself with every meal whether you are feeding your healthy cells or whether you are fertilizing the weeds. You have to respect the biology of the fast, the necessary silence of the digestive system that allows your body to heal itself. The rain is starting to let up a bit outside. I can see the outline of the trees again. I am going to put this photograph of Arthur back into the box and take it up to the attic. I do not need to look at it anymore to remember the lesson. The lesson is etched into the way I live every day now. I cannot control how much time I have left on this earth. None of us can. But I can absolutely control whether I spend that time fighting my body or giving it the exact environment it needs to fight for me. Tomorrow morning, when you walk into your kitchen, take a hard look at the things you consider to be healthy. Look at the juices, the granolas, the sweetened yogurts. Think about the fertilizer. Think about the fuel. You have the power to cut the supply lines. You have the power to starve the things that should not be growing. It is a choice you make every single time you sit down at the table. I hope you make the choice that gives you the best possible chance to sit at that table for a very long time. I will see you next time.